when you're building a whole new app, are you recycling their old business process, or are you redefining the business process with them as you're building a new app?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the accurate part of the interpretation here, is that we're taking what they have and just replicating it. So it's like if someone wrote like acceptance testing for app number 1, app number 2 will meet all those requirements. So the user flows are the same, the user experience is the same, except modernizing the technology, giving it a new code base, cleaner code base, better organized, making it to where it's going to scale, not just scale like code and data, but also scale in business processes, so that round 2, they can actually look at a clean code base, clean platform, clean application, and say, okay, let's make all of these changes to our processes now. And now it's going to be much easier to make those changes. So it's almost like doing a cut of the code identical to what they already have, and then doing optimization on the business process later, because they can't break it. I mean, they've got it's a big energy company. They are doing a lot day to day. They can have zero downtime, and
high transaction sort of work, I assume.
High transaction and highly finance driven, right? So there's a ton. I mean, this is almost an extensive application modeling, and this application that we've, that we're in the process of modernizing was really a gap that was built for the shortcomings of Microsoft Dynamics Solomon. So it didn't have the joint venture capabilities, didn't have the financial tracking capabilities, and every time they tried to tweak it to make the business process work, it would break. And they would have to get new development in and then go back through antiquated databases. And it's just, it came to that point where luckily when we came into it, it was like, oh, we can clean this up quick.
Yeah, well, that's great. Are you also updating, as you're doing the front end, are you basically replicating the data in a modern data environment? Or are you really doing a data architecture? Is that part of the phase 2, phase 3?
Well, it's a little bit of both, right? So we have to, as you have spaghetti code, you also have spaghetti data structures.
Right.
The key point here I want to make sure to emphasize is that not only did this new application have to require zero downtime from a transaction perspective, but it also has to require zero downtime for the users. So there's no learning curve time. It's not like they can go from app 1 to, or let's say app 1.0 to 2.0. A user can't go from 1.0 to 2.0 and not know how to do something. So really the user experience has to be identical. And for this part, because what they wanted to do in the past, I'm just going to make up a number, say 3 years ago, they wanted to make a tweak to the process to change how that user does something to make it more efficient. But as soon as they tried to make that change in the code, it broke things. So they're like, okay, let's update the code, modernize the stack, get the data more organized, so that when we want to make these minor changes, there's still zero downtime for the new usability, and there's zero downtime for the data. So the first phase is cleaning up the code, decoupling things, organizing the database in a better way so that things can be, and I don't want to overemphasize the word microservice, but like that's the point here. It's like, let's create these tasks and let's micro decouple them, so that if we want to change the process to whatever whatever CFO needs to make one change of the process, it doesn't change how other things are happening throughout the application. So we had to, step 1 is rebuild the code base, unspaghetti it, so to speak, and get the data structure in a place to where it can be agile to new business processes, so that once we're done with that, then we're like, okay, now the software is in a good place. Can we make the optimization for a better user experience for the CFO now, or whoever the role is? And then the software can quickly make that change without breaking anything or creating downtime.
That's fantastic. So while you're doing that, the customer came to you having a good understanding. They've built this mess, as it were. But did you have to sort of guide them in these steps of, here's how we're going to decouple this, here's these steps we're going to utilize, or did they come to you with a level of knowledge that we know we've made this mistake? Can you do this work?
Well, Brent can probably speak to this a little bit more, but I will say from my perspective, it's neither.
Great.
They both, they didn't have an idea to do it. Basically, they gave us the grounds to run with it, knowing our expertise and our experience in this. They trust it. So they're not needing to know the breakdown of the decoupling. They just say like this decoupling has to happen. Like it has to be microservice. It has to be that way. We don't know how you're going to do it, but do it. But the other thing that I think is also important to mention that Brent mentioned earlier was that this software platform was built in several iterations of acquisitions. So when you say like they're coming to us because they built something that doesn't work, the reality is, and the funny thing is they, the client, didn't build this at all because they acquired it over time. So they know the business process around it, but they don't have the depth of like why. Like I will ask them questions like, why is this data here? And someone go, that's how the previous company did it. We don't know. And they're like, that's one of the reasons why we need to rebuild this application, is so that we can also understand what those pieces are. And
I think that's a great point to reinforce, is that a lot of larger to mid to large size companies now, they got there quickly by acquiring other companies. Yep. They understood the business process they wanted to take. And when they acquired a company, they wanted 1/3 of their business process, but they acquired 2/3, and they're giving you the penguin salute. I don't know why things are the way they are. So this is a great example of how what you do is being affected and impacting this type of company. So do we have a rough idea how long this phase will take and then into the next two phases?
Yeah, so the first phase is about, we'll just say 3 to 5 months from beginning to end. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, especially even from like a software engineering perspective, it's really nice to have an existing product that works, right? So it's easier to do like your QA testing, your UAT testing, because you're like, zero downtime. We need it to function and do the exact same thing. So that's nice. That was pretty straightforward when it comes to scoping. But and as well as, since we're not trying to reuse their code, we're writing new code, it allows us to have a lot more strength on the scope and scalability. Like, for example, if we went into this project and someone said, okay, we want to use our same code base, but we want to make these changes, I'll tell you it's going to take 6 months longer, maybe even a year longer. But if we're able to learn from it and apply better practices with the new system, it's much quicker. I have a lot of experience around this, like the change management, and a lot of people push against it, but it's oftentimes, especially with new modern technology, it's oftentimes better to build new than to try to optimize what you already have.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah. You obviously want to make that proper assessment, right? Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. But when you have a spaghetti situation like we have now, you have to build new. I mean, it would be a nightmare to try to use the same code base. There might be a lot of value there, which I'll be honest with you, when we're doing the scoping, a lot of the code has most recently become very valuable. And to be able to use some of the types, for example, and things that are defined in the code. But then you just got to remove some of those items and say, okay, that does no longer exist. We have to change that out. And it's a really good, it's almost like, it reminds me of something I've done with previous companies where you have an R&D department, right? You do this R&D software idea, and then the R&D guy goes, hey, we're done with it. It's been approved by business, and then they hand it off to the software engineering team. And the software engineering team looks at this prototype and says, I can't use this.
Why? So, it doesn't. Yeah.
I can't reuse. So it's like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to use the same code, but use the same thing. So it's almost like they, what's another way, a previous project they're working on was similar to this. It's like, okay, well then just use it as your documentation. Use it as your scope documentation, right? It's like, it becomes a value as documentation more than a value as code. And that's like good.
Yeah, and that brings me to what I was going to say. As one point, a lot of people say, oh, we know it works because it's this, and the best you could do is document what they like as far as expectations. But the second point I really had midway through was, as you're building this, now you're decoupling. Are you doing a migration where the new software is feeding into old data structures, or are you feeding to two separate data structures as you stand this up? And the second data structure is something flexible and adaptable, or are you feeding into the old data structures with new components?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. The process of trying to do the backwards compatibility or the forward compatibility is a nightmare when it comes to projects like this. And so you have to identify what some of the business goals are and identify where they actually feel about feeding both of those data. And to be frank with you, with this project and with a lot of projects I've experienced with before, it's always better to have a hard cut with your data, right? It's much easier than to have to build in backwards compatibility or forward compatibility. So with this project, that's what we decided to do, which requires a lot of UAT, right? It's going to require a lot of testing to make sure.
We had a lot of. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Just a lot of testing by the client so that they don't decide to go backwards. Right. So that's.
And is the client really proactive in providing the users, or at least those testing elements, the time to get those testing done? A lot of times I've done deployments and then I've got to wait for the testers to be available. Yeah. They want to do it in a certain manner, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem that we're tackling.
And we're talking about the backwards compatibility aspect of it. We went to the customer and specifically the CIO and kind of gave them the option. Like, look, we can't make this completely reverse backwards compatible, any which way, so that you have a swivel chair environment, you have old and new, and they both do complete data syncs, but there's a cost to that, right? So there's a significant amount of more development and a significant amount of more data cleansing. And of course, we guided them along the way that we thought that they should go as good partners were, and knowing the business and being in there for quite a bit of time. So yeah, they kind of took our guidance and went in that direction. One other point that I thought was kind of unique is this project really touched, I call it the four pillars of technology, right? Or IT. So you've got security, you've got compute, you've got networking, and you've got the application itself, right? The acronym SCAN. So this particular application has a big front end, so anybody can upload documentation into it, which then goes into some level of storage where we're bolting on, in the later parts of the project is what they call 0-day content disarm and reconstruction. So obviously the security aspect of it. So any file that comes in is completely taken apart at the binary level. Any malicious code can be removed. It's put back together in the data flow, so there's no loss of time, and then there's zero risk. So that's it's even it's an advancement towards any type of malware, antivirus. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's a newer technology, and obviously as an energy company, they're very interested in securing all of their data sets. So it was like I said, it touched everything.
Well, and given that level of sensitivity, are you working with, do they have like an FTE or a couple of bodies dedicated to security, not so much as to micromanage, but to be very much involved in how you're deploying the code, how you're developing the code, saying that you have to use these encryption standards or work with these particular security products?
Not so much products. So I would say their main advisor is for lack of a CISO position that they do not have there. So the CIO is very security savvy, and the head of technology themselves. So they run very thin as far as FTEs and rely on contractors. Right. So an advisory panel, I'm actually on their advisory panel for the security aspect of it. So I wanted to make sure that as this is a true development opportunity and a development scope, there is the security concern of hardening the code and making sure that any type of information flow is bulletproof, because they're what they call NERC SIP compliant, which is an energy factory, which is very regulated.
just by happenstance, I worked with FERC right after the Enron debacle and redesigned their CPIC and some of the security oversight, pay.gov, how energy companies pay their taxes. And so I'm intimately familiar with these processes and then the challenge of setting it up with the major energy companies. So I appreciate the efforts that you're going through, because a lot of it is we know what we want to get to. We know what the regulations state we have to get to. Now do the two really align? Similar to, you're delivering the new data, it's better to do a clean cut over to this hardened environment. But in the meantime, you can't let the older stuff slip further and further behind as far as security. It's not as if you're not responsible for that as well. You still got to maintain that. So I would imagine it's an interesting spot for the CISO, the CIO, to be making sure that the future security not only is great, but he maintains the security levels on what he already has.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. The very security conscious organization, as they have to be. Because if you ask Colonial Pipeline where they missed it, I'm sure they have a few examples.
I could provide, and I did provide an unsolicited proposal with other security companies, Zscaler, and a few other components. Here's what we should have done 2 years earlier. If you had added these Internet of Things, here's how you could do the regulatory oversight and then automate it from the company's perspective, and then allow somebody keeping an eye on things so you don't have a Colonial Pipeline disaster.
I've got a question. Earlier we mentioned that we beat out AWS, or we can say there's a number of different consultancies in on the bidding process for this. What made this particular client pick our services over other suppliers, more traditional consultancies?
Sure, I can speak to that. So one is with all my partners, and another one that I consider a partner and not just a client, there's a level of trust, right? So there was that aspect of having the relationship building and having a trust factor in with, the senior execs, especially the CIO. And the other one is it was the competition, for lack of a better term, was just overbidding it, right? So they would just pile on layers of oversight of, technical PMs and then 4 different architects and then executive oversight where, it just doesn't make sense, right? This isn't, rebuilding an ERP from the ground up. We took the sensible approach and said, all right, pragmatically understanding your business, understanding your needs, and let's give you a sensible budget. And they were extremely open to the proposal and basically said, yeah, I don't want these guys. I want you guys to come in here and just do it as a staff extension, not as just a contractor.
And they're keenly aware of what they're asking for, so they'll know if it goes beyond the scope of the original expectations, that if there's a budget hiccup, it's not a question of, oh, we missed a mark. It's we're now extending it beyond the original request. So this is the budget of resources we're going to have to add to this particular program.
So yeah, this was a fixed fee proposal and project. But we're obviously built in with the knowledge of the customer said, look, there's going to be some flexibility here. There has to be, because we're wanting to start this extremely fast. So setting up backstops or checkpoints and say, okay, are we still on track? Are we still on target? Are we still, getting this into a true development? Sprint cycle of 6 sprints was the original bid, but they being upwards with the customer saying, look, there could be deviation because we didn't scope this for 3 months. Right, we came in, took the amount of energy, gave them a very competitive option, and put the flexibility on there. So there's complete transparency, especially in the project plan where they see all the steps on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect. I like how you worded that. It's more like a staff augmentation than it is bringing in a contract company. That's a really big difference. And then someone. And Brent, you can speak to this as well with your experience, but with my experience, I've been a part of a lot of startups and a lot of lean projects. And so a lot of what I spend my time doing, prior to getting the project, is identifying what's the MVP here? Like what's the most viable product delivery here? And a lot of contract companies come in here, they don't always take that approach of what is the MVP. A lot of times they take the approach of like, okay, this is our cookie cutter of the way we do things. We think you should do all these things. And it's like, look, I'm not loyal to some technology or loyal to some bad process. If I don't think you need it, I'm not going to waste my time working on it. I'm not going to tell my team that you need to, develop out this whole piece of your product because it's something that our team's used to doing. We're going to look at your product and we're going to say, no, your product needs XYZ and all the other things that are mentioned. We really feel like not only would it be a waste of your return on investment for this project, but it could potentially pigeonhole you into future projects. So that's what the value of an MVP is that, we might deliver this application and they're like, hey, we really love this and we've thought about it. We want to completely pivot a completely different direction now. Like, for example, I'm just going to make something up. Like we're using AWS. They could come to us and say, hey, look, we don't want to use AWS microservices anymore. We don't want to use Lambdas, but we love all the code that you've written. Can you port those to GCP or to Azure? And we're like, you know what? We didn't tie ourselves too completely to AWS. Like we didn't completely do those things because we didn't think you needed them. So yeah, let's talk about how we can do that. And it's going to be a much lower effort where I think the competitors who are bidding on this process were doing that. They were saying like, hey, you should add this, you should add this, you should add this, because it's going to help your company. And it's like, who are you to decide what's going to help my company? We just need to replace this. So we identified what the MVP was. And I do feel like that was a big piece of the win. But, for the sake of this conversation and for the sake of future projects and everything, I will also say what caused us to win this, I think we have to really keep an open, honest mindset is trust. And Brent mentioned it. I think that's the biggest piece with the culture and community that we're in. I know people who've won projects that they didn't deserve and it cost more, but the trust was there. The relationship was there. The working with people that are trustable people that you can identify and work with on past projects and things. The loyalty there is very valuable. I tell my team all the time, software team or business team all the time that like trust is always better than talent. Because talent often lies, unfortunately, trust. But if you have trust and open transparency and honesty with people, then it creates a tighter connection. And that, I think that's a big piece to a lot of this. Sure, we can deliver great technology, but what sets us apart most of the time is the relationship when it comes to winning projects.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only thing I would finish that off with, Nathan, is that every relationship and it doesn't matter what roles on the team or what teams that I'm working with, make sure your communications are higher than your expectations, and that develops the trust. Even with abject strangers, if you're constantly communicating above the volume of expectation, it'll be fine. But once you start, even on a minor expectation of documentation or reporting or usability, and that's not communicated clearly, that's when the failure steps in. So, that's a great way to articulate how it's important to have that trust.
Yeah. Another piece about that trust, which I think is important to projects like ours and potential other future rewrites, is being able to be transparent about the gotchas or as other people I work with, we call them the oh shits. It's like you can be into a project and just be like, oh shit, we misscoped this, or this isn't right, or like we found something else in your spaghetti that's creating problems. If you're the client and you've hired a software team to work on this, you want to know those oh shits. Where a lot of contractor companies, they kind of hide the oh shits with like scope creep or whatever, or
our
like
process will modify this.
Yes. And it's just like you know what, like just tell me. A lot of clients, they just want to know, just like tell me what you're running into and let's figure out how to solve this together. We don't want you to go solve it in a black box vacuum, in your software team. Like, and so we feel that like when you create a relationship with the client that you can be open and transparent, it's a win-win on both sides. Because, let's say, I'm just going to make something up here, but like, let's say that we originally scoped it to be I don't know, a microservice and using Lambda. And then we realized like, hey, this isn't going to work because of all this coupling with this and with this data, whatever. The software team could be quiet about it and say, let's just keep it in microservice because that's what we told the client, but it's really going to kill performance. And we'll just deal with the performance thing later. Right. Whereas if you have a relationship with the client, you can go to the client and say, hey, listen, we've identified if we continue going this route, this is going to have a horrible performance. It's going to be this, going to be that. And then the client's going to respond and say, hey, you know what? It's probably a good idea if we kind of, stop this contract. Let's create a new contract if it requires, so that we can make sure that we're going the right direction we need to go. And I have seen a lot of contract companies deliver what the scope was.
What was asked.
But then walk away. The software developers walk away washing their hands going, hey, if there's a phase 2, I don't want to work on it. And that's, that I've seen that happen a lot. And
that really speaks to the topic today when we're talking about technical debt. Part of that trust is being able to understand what the customers offered you and then what you identify, and then saying, look, this is the technical debt we're solving. This is what modernization is going to do for you. But if it's going to create other technical debt, be aware of this, because it's not just the cost, it's the resource. We can do exactly what you asked us to do. And once you, like you said, we walk away, well, we honored the contract. Well, it's not about honoring the contract. It's about building that trust. And that really speaks to it.
Yeah. And it goes both ways, right? Because there is obviously the honoring the contract aspect of it. There's not a like, you can't do that. Like, for example, with this client, we don't have that scenario. Like I said, obviously we don't have that, oh shit, where we got to re-architect this or whatever. We didn't choose right. But in the scenarios where it could be like, let's say honor the contract, if the software team decide to honor the contract versus communicate, it could be that like, hey, listen, we've identified these things, but we want to fulfill the contract. We can fulfill the contract, but we suggest that in phase 2, you fix those 3 or 4 things. And I think communicating that early with the client, building that trust is going to win. You'll be doing projects with that client forever, right? Agreed. And that's the goal, right? No, I say nobody, but no smart business person wants. It's not like selling a product, where like you just give it to them, you never want to see them again, right? Like you want them coming back into your store. You want reoccurring customers. So that's also the way that we look at it. So any smart business person is going to say, I want to be able to work with this client when this project is over. So how do we do that?
They want to feel like not only did they get what they paid for, but they're getting more than what they paid for, so they can move forward on whatever project comes down the line. And when it does come, they'll be calling you.
Yeah, or telling their friends.
At least give us the first right of refusal, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what we're getting to with our customers as we line them up especially through Nathan and I's endeavor. So set it in, make your presence, kill it in the first and every time to you and say, hey, I have this problem, which is how this actually came about.
Yeah.
I have this problem, you can solve it, and it doesn't matter. Yep, we can solve it.
And it's actually funny because I had a early morning meeting with the CEO of this other company, and we were talking about loyalty and how, like, us as humans, it's interesting how loyal we are to someone when they're not even capable of doing the work. And I'm not saying that like we're in that situation, but he's seen that with one of his employees, that he would rather give that employee a task that she's never done in her life, and she'll fit, but he just trusts the relationship that he's developed with her, then go hire someone else who's done it 1,000 times, right? So the first right of refusal for the next project, it may be something that, we've never done before. But if you have the relationship with the client goes, you know what? You're smart. I love working with you. I believe you're capable of getting it done. Let's work together. So that's a very important aspect. And I think that speaks a lot to us, and our personality and what's important to us. I mean, I think we have pretty high values and integrity. We value the people in the other company, not just their software. So that piece of it, it's like it goes a long way with clients, but also like potential people who want to work with us, like that's how we want to work. Like I don't want to work just in transactions.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense for the business at all just to continuously be chasing its tail and working a transactional model, just giving people bodies. I think that's why Coltech as a business anyway has tried to look at developing it, or are moving into this advisory, the tech side of things, because we want to be sticky with customers. We want to work with businesses and actually help them achieve outcomes. There's no point in just being a body shop, because it's not where we want to go as a business. We want to build that trust with clients so that we can help them, if it's a startup, as Nathan mentioned earlier, expand and grow and build the infrastructure and help them to be able to do that. If it's a large energy company, make sure that they're securing their infrastructure, make sure that their migrations to the cloud are going where they need to go, but just being that go-to business that our partners want to come to. And it's not going to work for everyone, and we don't want to work with everyone. We want to work with businesses that we can build that relationship with. I think that's the most important part about it.
Otherwise, you're going to go through your Rolodex really quick and be out of customers in a hurry.
Tell me about it. But yeah, no, I think that's some really good stuff that we got there. What I'll do is I'll get it spliced up where I can. I'll send the recordings out to you straight away, and then I'll get it spliced up by a video man, and I'll get the some little clips to send over to you by the this time next week. And then we can say, yeah, that looks good, that looks great, and then we'll put it out. And then Brent, I know you want to speak about some of the other cybersecurity stuff, and maybe me and you can do that together separately.
Sure. I mean, the more blasts, more campaign, the more eye-opening, and people will start realizing that you've got the skill sets there, and they'll start popping in. So yeah, whenever you want to strategize about that. For our next meeting, or whenever we do this again, if you want to send out Coltech backgrounds, we can pop those up. I just realized mine's been up there too.
I'll get that. That is a very good idea. I'll get Megan to make those as well. But yeah, look, guys, thanks very, very much. Ben and Nathan, I've heard that you're leading Harrier Stray tonight, apparently.
That's the plan.
I don't know about tonight. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We're starting at happy hour at 4:00, and we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah.
Where are we meeting?
He was
the well.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Gravity Voice yesterday. When I spoke to him in the morning, so him and Jess went out on Sunday. So,
oh wow,
there's no different to what I would probably be doing with him when I'm there anyway. So I can't complain. But look after him, please. He's got work to do.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing is that's why I also said we'll see where it goes, because man, I've got a busy week this week. I've got a lot of work.
I had a busy week over the weekend where I did a big push for my wife's green card. So it got all the documents through, put on my lawyer's hat, went through every single exhibit, submitted it this morning, and now I can
breathe a little bit.
My God. Ben's relaxing tonight then, so he'll be the one.
So there might be a beverage or two tonight.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, should I Uber or should I drive? Like, that's just a question.
I don't think that makes any difference to you.
Don't scooter.
I can walk. It's actually walk. I'm not driving anywhere. I'm walking. Yeah. The well is mile away.
Enjoy that tonight. Thanks very, very much for that today, guys. Really, really good session. I think we've got some really good stuff that we can put out. And love to see you all again.
Yep.
Brent, it'd be great to catch up with a little security background. I'd love to hear more about what you got.